Hey, Benny. How are you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and this is an exciting conversation. We're going to get into some meaty topics here, so I'm really glad that you could join me. You were an undergrad at Emory, majoring in Middle Eastern Studies and Arabic. You have your MPA in Public Policy from Princeton. You spent over a decade with the Clinton Foundation working on climate initiatives and the Clinton Health Access Initiative. Anything has been in reach for you throughout your career. You might not say that. I'll say that. Anything is within reach for you. Why sports? Why did you decide to make this move away from more of that side into the sports industry?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I was very fortunate to get into that industry early. Before that, I was a management consultant, and as you know about management consulting, it's solve every problem, become an expert in 2 days, advise a client. But my dream was always to do something international, and that's why
Mhm.
I actually studied Arabic in high school, studied Arabic in college, lived in Egypt twice,
Wow.
and then did a Fulbright in Vietnam. And that kind of really led me to wanting to lead an international career. And at that time, I wanted to be a State Department official,
Yeah.
uh, and then I kind of refined it to be, let's work in international development. And some people conflate international development with nonprofit or foundation work, but it's a lot of the good work that people do around the world to really help developing countries and disadvantaged populations at a much severe degree than to say here in the United States. Not
Yeah.
saying that there's no issues in the United States that need to be solved.
Hmm.
I did management consulting as a stopgap when I came back to Washington, D.C., with the goal of really achieving and trying to get to grad school, because that's really a step that you need to take. And it's
Yeah.
not too dissimilar from sports in a certain way, but you have to really get that graduate degree at a top institution to really get it launched to your career. So I did that. I got to the Clinton Foundation, an amazing organization. We were small, nimble, quick, and a very different kind of culture and approach to business because our leaders are actually from the top consulting firms, BCG, McKinsey,
Yeah.
and that's how we operated. And also supplemented by and complemented by experts. Say we were for public health. We definitely had public health officials that were working alongside us, but it was the different approach of the Clinton Foundation that kind of really got us going. Um, and I was very lucky to be appointed at a very young age to be the country director of Vietnam at
Wow.
28.
Yeah.
And then that's the kind of the way that they work. And also, how Bill Clinton operated his administration. Young people, smart, let's go.
Yeah.
And by the time I reached 35, and I was there for about, a total of almost 10 years, but so, I became deputy regional director of Southeast Asia. And it was kind of interesting because at some point you reach a pinnacle of that career space. And look, there's a lot of growth, but I felt like I reached a pinnacle of what I wanted to do in that space and
Yeah.
really wanted to switch back to business. And so, at that point in time, I'll be honest with you, my foray to sports is kind of by luck. So during that time, Henry Nguyen, who's also the founding owner of LAFC, he gathered a bunch of friends in Vietnam and said, hey, can you guys like help me like start a basketball team in Vietnam? I don't think this
Really?
is actually, yeah, I don't think this is actually on my LinkedIn, but like, okay, sure. He's like, hey, as a part-time job for all of us, he
Yeah.
wanted us to help him start the Saigon Heat as part of the ASEAN Basketball League. This is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Yeah.
And so we put our heads together, and next thing you know, I forgot how long it took, like 6 months or a year or something. We started a basketball team in Ho Chi Minh City.
That's
Um,
crazy.
and the branding, the team, the players, the cheerleaders, and
Yeah.
we brought fans. We taught fans how to cheer for at a basketball game in Vietnam. And funny enough, I became the color man for the on TV for ESPN Southeast Asia and
You
Fox
jumped right in. I
Southeast
love
Asia.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it was lucky because like, hey, you speak English, you play basketball, you know the game. Let's kind of jump in. So it was kind of my first foray into sports, but I really didn't think about it as a foray into sports. It was a fun project to be a part of because
Yeah.
I've always been a sports nut. And so that happened, and it was a fun project. And when I reached a certain point in my career with the foundation, And it was a very interesting, rewarding, and tough period of my life. But it was great. I decided to move back to the United States, and for a lot of career reasons.
Yeah.
And I moved back to San Francisco. I was looking for a job in the tech industry, and then all of a sudden, the Henry calls me and say, "Hey, I'm applying to buy for a team. It's LAFC. It's an LA team, the second team in MLS."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Look, we need to do a couple things in the organization, build the brand, build a team, build an organization, and then we need to build a stadium." So, what a better experience to further my business career development than to do that?
Yeah.
And then I showed up in SoCal for the first time in my life. In I think it was November, right after the announcement. First time in Southern California. Interviewed for the job, and it's like, "Hey, love to have you. Come join us. What do you want to do?" And it's like, "Yeah, we'll take. Let's see what it means to take on this job, and let's build a stadium." So I arrived a month later, December 1st of 2014, and there goes the start of my official sports career. And I've been with the team ever since.
It's amazing. So the timeline at October 30th, 2014, MLS awards the new expansion club to LAFC after Chivas USA dissolved, right? And then within a month, you're hired in December. Early on, now I've talked to a lot of people that have, and I've interviewed a lot of people that have started with an expansion team or have started with a new league or whatever. Early on, there's so much to do. There's so much. How does it? I mean, it's got to feel like trying to boil the ocean. How do you start to even prioritize and focus and put things in perspective when you have such a big task in front of you?
You try to your best to prioritize what needs to get done. And it's part of the expansion was to a requirement was to build a stadium, and that
Yeah,
was priority number one. And we were on a timeline. And initially, actually, we were slated to open in 17 versus 18. So that's when I landed. When I landed on December 1st, the morning of, I took a flight from San Francisco. It was a 6 o'clock flight. I landed at 8, and I went straight to the offices to start negotiating with the team the lease deal of the property that we're at. Um,
yeah,
so you kind of just prioritize what needs to get done. That was priority number one. Priority number two was building the brand. You had to
yeah,
start building a fan base and the brand itself, even when you didn't have a brand, right? So it was a very interesting way of really approaching it. But we knew that we had to build a fan base. We had a loose idea of what the brand would be or is, and it was a vision that was set by senior management at the time and the
yeah,
founding owners. And then you start going and you start mapping out what needs to get done. So what's interesting about sports is that you have firm deadlines of when you need to launch a team or we need to launch a building because you're either going to hit this date and you're going to open up or you don't, right? So
yeah,
I mean, you walk backwards from there, and then we start building the different pieces of the club together. So definitely, I was number five at the club. Then we brought in our head of marketing, um, right after me, Richard Roscoe, an amazing gentleman. If you haven't met him, then we brought in the head of supporters. We knew
okay,
that supporters and supporter culture was important to us. That was a hire after that. Patrick Avilas, he's still with us today. And then we
yeah,
started building it from there. So in parallel, we knew that we had to lock in our logo, lock in our colors, I build the brand, build the fan base, build a stadium, and meanwhile build an organization. So that's how we prioritized it and that's how we approached it. And of course along the way, for the building, you got the architects, the construction
yeah.
guys,
You make it
everything
sound
else.
so
So
simple. It's pretty complex.
it's yeah, no, it's fun. And the
Yeah,
marketing side, you just start building that side, and you got to think about sales and then ticket
yeah,
sales, and then building a fan base to actually sign up for your team like years in advance. And then we just peppered in. Obviously, a lot of us came from sports, but a lot of us didn't come from sports.
yeah,
And I think this is a really interesting element for me. I viewed it as a social experiment, right?
mm,
Because it's an emotional product they're trying to sell. And we had no product. We had no coach, no players. We had an
right,
idea. So how do you actually start that? And it was very interesting. So we did even design sessions that we can talk about later, early
yeah,
on, enrolling fans. And the challenge in front of us was that there's 11 other professional sports teams in LA. The two NFL teams were coming,
mm-hmm,
and how do you and then the Galaxy were here, five
yep.
championships,
New
you know,
SoFi Stadium that's going to be in a way competition. You got a lot to look at.
Yeah. So yeah, we took that on. I knew we had a couple principled ideas of how to approach these things, and so
Yeah.
that's how we first launched.
So I was reading through some of the stats for Bank of California Stadium, and I found myself, because I am admittedly a dork in this stuff, I found myself like thinking, oh, that's super cool. Oh, that's a really neat idea. I mean, every seat within 135 feet of the pitch. It's an LED silver certified stadium, over 1,800 full time jobs created. As you consider now that the stadium is built, everything's where it needs to be, and you look back at that accomplishment, what are you most proud of? What do you look at and say, man, I'm really glad we pushed for that? I'm glad that happened.
I think the the proudest thing about it's not just a physical thing. It's really kind of seeing the joy and happiness that people experience when they come to our stadium. Yeah, and the smiles on their faces. It's really interesting. I mean, our building is pretty democratized, and what I mean by that is that we didn't know a lot, and um, we didn't know what we could do for everyone. And usually, even when it came to marketing, right, we're talking about, oh, targeted marketing. Should we do this? Should we do that for this segment, that segment? And Rich pushed back. It's like, no, let's see how we what we can do, and kept writing it, and it kind of bled into the building. You need premium because it holds a lot of your revenue for the
Yeah.
stadium, but then we also have $22 tickets for supporters, and you look throughout the stadium, there's varying price points. Not many people can really achieve that, but in that design, it kind of led into that as part of our economic model, and that's where you have a diversity of people by color, socioeconomic status, whatever it may be, and when everybody comes together to celebrate the idea of LAFC not as a team on the field, but as a community, is really the strength of what we think is the power of our organization and the happiness and joy that comes with that. So that's really kind of a huge element of what I think is the proudest moment of opening day, and as it continues to be, and how we deliver the best experience for our fans.
Is that something that we don't talk about enough in sports, is the positive local impact? Because I mean, you go through the list and the jobs that are created and the opening to the environment for everyone of all diverse cultures to be able to come and be a part of a, it's just a meritocracy in a way. It's just like everybody can be there, and it's like the best teams win, and it's based on accomplishment. It's just is great environment. Is that something we just miss out on, and we don't talk enough when we talk about sports and the impact of sports business? Is just the positive effect it has on a local community.
Yeah, I mean, even today's world, during this pandemic, I think you'll see a transition with our partners, sponsorship partners. There is a shift to community. We just put it at the forefront of everything that we did. I think part of it was my background, right? It's natural for me to help the local community, and our stadium is in the middle of South LA, formerly known as South Central. We put it as a pillar to support the community and our commitments to the community. So whether it be our commitment for local hiring for our project, or 40% local hiring commitment, 35% MeBe WeBe contracts, which is minority, woman-owned, veteran-owned, disabled-owned businesses. And even if you ever have a chance to come to our stadium, I'll show you the elements of our building that we thought about where we needed to engage the community. We didn't want to turn our backs to them. We kept our corners open. We kept our gates open. So when you actually walk up at human scale, people in the neighborhood can see the green grass. And those are the things that we thought about. And among all other commitments for our community, and we continue to do a lot of good work in the community now, and it's really a core pillar of ours, regardless of what it is. And I think that's important. I think that's important for everyone, and I think it's a very powerful element of a successful sports business is really engaging a local community. It's not about maximizing revenue. You win their people's hearts before they
Yeah.
win their wallets, and I think that'll come. And I think that's the power of their community and our brand, and how we really approach the work in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a complicated place and a complex place, but when we have something like this and brings people together, it's great.
Let's lean into this idea a little bit. So at LFC, you guys talked about listening to the fans. You've talked about it now and how important that is. And you hosted community design workshops with the fans. And it really looks to be a human centered design approach. What did this mean? What was this? What was your approach? And why was that important for you guys to go about it in that way?
It's about enrolling people as part of our journey. And we're lucky enough to start fresh with a new organization, a new stadium, a new everything, a new supporter group. And we thought it's the power of the people. And whether they be, potential suite buyers, or they would be supporters, or they would be people sitting in section 208 versus 110, we wanted to gather as many people as possible to get their ideas of what they wanted to co-build and co-create with us. And look, we're not the smartest people in the world. You have to use human-centered design, empathy, to really understand what people need and want. So we talked about fan journey, and we wanted to understand. I didn't know anything about Los Angeles. People here know a lot about Los Angeles,
Yeah.
so we wanted to listen and understand. And even our local staff who are from Los Angeles, there's a lot of perspectives you don't hear about or know about, learn about. So we made it a point to make sure that we enrolled them in almost every single step of the process, and use human-centered design as a methodology to approach that. And I thought it was a very powerful tool. I've used it before. I come
Yeah.
from a business of empathy and trying to work with people to change human behavior. And that's a key, right? Sports, we're selling an emotional product. And the emotional product is not just the product on the field. And one principal item is that we wanted to make sure that we want to protect ourselves from the downside of losing. And as you know, in sports, it's like, well, if we win, great. If we lose, okay. No,
Yeah.
that's not what we wanted to approach our business and how we actually build our community, and really add value to the community itself.
Yeah, it's so much about the overall experience and that connectivity, right? So if the fans feel like they go to a game, they know they're going to have a good time no matter what, win, loss, whatever, and they're going to feel connected to those other people amongst their community. That's a really powerful message that can be accomplished there. That's something that everybody should aim for. I've talked to so many people in sales that are not like, we're not selling wins and losses, we're selling experience. You
Mhm.
know, that's an important distinction, and that community value that you're bringing into it too is so important. I read a quote from the owner and executive chairman of LAFC, Peter Guber. He told the LA Times a few years back, when you build an organization, you build a culture, and culture is your business plan. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, like just pondering it in my head. But what does that mean to you, that culture is your business plan?
I think culture is the heart of your business plan. I mean, you can try to optimize revenue all you want, but I think that's the foundation of how we approach our business. First, it's internal culture, and then there's external culture, right? How you externalize your culture. Internally, look, we were 5, 6 people sitting around to 10 people for a year trying to figure out how to build a club and a stadium. And everyone's willing to chip in. Everyone was pretty humble of how they approached it. And then we grew from there. And there was a lot of work. There was a lot of sleepless nights, and everyone's playing multiple roles. And when you work in a startup, that happens. But for us, we're just crossing lanes, and um, possibly sometimes driving drunk a little bit of crossing those lanes. But it was really important for us to have that kind of centered in a mission that we wanted to achieve. And it was like building it for the community and the people. And that's how we charge ahead with it. And then when you talk about community that we have, that was our culture. We're building a community, and that has to be consistent. And how we communicated it to the city of Los Angeles with 10 and 11 other sports teams. The Dodgers were here, their
Yeah.
legacy, the Lakers, you know. Um, our culture, not about the product on the field or a player or a coach, went first, and it was critical to everything that we did. So we talk about community, experience, and people. That's culture. It wasn't like anything else particular that's business or frigid or rigid.
I love that idea of marrying the internal and external culture. That the way you operate your business and the way you operate in the community go hand in hand. I think that's so important to know.
Yeah,
The
and just
pandemic is. Go ahead.
let
Go
me
ahead.
let
Yeah.
me, let me note that and internally and both externally, internally your culture evolves, right? And as you get bigger, you go through the cycles of business, and it's not easy. And when externally too, it causes conversation about brand. It's brand is perception of your brand by the people when that evolves. So these things are really important to note as you grow and try to stabilize. And it's interesting because I think a lot of conversation professionals in the sports industry, well, you build a building, you build a new team, then 3 years later, what do you do? But
Hmm.
for us, how do you continue to innovate and do different things to actually really make it interesting and also build on a more successful brand and community and so forth? And so we're just seeing this great trajectory, and we're going to keep going.
That's awesome. It's a living thing, right? It's continually in flux, continually changing. And you have to adapt with it. I love that. So the pandemic has affected sports in a lot of ways, right? We've talked about this a lot over the last year. I've talked with all kinds of different people as part of this podcast. One thing I don't think we talk about enough are the daily workers, the parking attendants, the concession workers, culinary, hospitality, who depend on this game day experience to survive. How or what can we be doing better to support these staffers who are affected by the lack of game day events and, the unknown of what's coming in the future?
Yeah, it's a very important question. And when you talk about a place like Los Angeles, where the service industry is huge, our economy has taken a huge hit. During the time of the pandemic, we were very active in a lot of different ways. We have assets on the freeway or digital boards, and we have a voice through our social media and through a lot of different channels, and it's unique. And PSAs about signing up for the census, encouraging voting. We have hosted over 20 food drives. Many of those were offered to our part-time workers to come and collect food if they needed it. And those are the things that we've been hoping to help, and we're ready to, a lot of the COVID information, getting
Mm-hmm.
testing, supporting that testing at our site run by, the state of California, and encouraging people to go testing. Vaccines are coming up, and vaccine hesitancy is huge among certain communities, and we want to make sure that everyone gets vaccinated so all of us reach a point where we can return back to normal. And especially jobs. I think that luckily we're the last state, I think, we're getting fans back, but it's at limited capacity. There's great nonprofits out there like Working Nation that are distributing information about what's possible and what to look for and information on, say, the stimulus checks. These things are not easy to, they don't just show up, right?
Right.
Then how do we really communicate and help people other than direct employment or temporary relief to get everyone back on their feet and get this economy back going again? Restaurant industry has been hit. So many restaurants have been closed. The food industry folks are in dire need of what their future may be. We don't know. And other things like guest services, parking attendants. Hopefully, it will
Mm-hmm.
all come back, but it's not going to come back easily or quickly. And so we just have to figure out different innovative ways to get information to either relief or potential opportunities that may come up. But that's what I think that our role as sports
Yeah.
industries with our megaphones can do.
It's so true. And we love Working Nation. I've had Joan Lynch on this show twice, and she's fabulous and is so caring and thoughtful about how they can help and make an impact. And it's nice to see that you guys are doing the same as well. We stress on this show, we have a lot of people in our audience who are young people thinking about getting into the sports industry. We stress on the show quite often that sports is an industry. It's not a job itself. You don't just work in sports. They're jobs that are very related to business, right? We talk finance, HR, all the different things in corporate strategy, development. There's so many things that happen outside of sports that happen inside of sports. How important
Mhm.
is it, in your view, for young people listening to really focus on business skills to be successful in sports? Those are those things that just translate so well, right?
Certainly, it's kind of interesting because I think I consider myself as new to the industry, but I've been 6 years deep. But it's a very untraditional background, as you can see. Um, I'm all about on the business side. There's a limit on the performance side, right? It's kind of like
Yeah,
who wants to be president one day, great. Who wants to be GM one day, great. There's
right.
there, there's changing winds of how that is being done, right? You have a lot of people, you have economists that are now co-GMs, like for
Yes.
example, at the Dodgers. That's very interesting. And the Moneyball. Well, now the business side is catching up. It's changing. There's a lot of people coming from the industry, such as private equity firms and businesses coming to buy, and business people moving into the industry. And so now, you see a lot of influx of folks coming from the business side with business skills to work in the industry. And that's the core of everything that powers everything at a sports business. So it's very important to figure out the baseline and have a foundation of business skills to come into sports now. It's not just about ticket sales and sponsorships. It's about data analytics, business intelligence,
Yep.
understanding how to manage people, things like that. And now we're entering the world of social media, performance metrics, the world of NFTs, digital technology. You have to have the basics of business to or experience to get there. And look, I was in the humanities, and we talked about human-centered design. You
Yeah.
have to understand people to sell them an emotional product. So don't forget about that element too. It's not all about business, business, business.
Yeah.
Understand, do your social science and the humanities studies, but that's really a core element of being successful. And I was lucky to have management consulting as part of my training. And it's not all about business, it's all about multidisciplinary functions to actually understand something. And human centered design is exactly that. And that's would be my suggestion. How we get there is a whole different conversation. But yes, focus on business skills. If you want to do performance, it's great. There's limited slots, but on the
Yeah.
business side, that's going to be a dominating force. If it's not in the perceptions of people of what the sports business actually is, it's here. And you see huge movements on that space and how things are changing down in the sports industry.
It's so true. I've talked to many people in hiring that keep saying over and over to me, they're like, the trends we're seeing are business intelligence, revenue optimization, business analysts. That's what we're looking for. That's what we want. That's what we need more of. And I love the idea that you're bringing up of almost marrying the idea of human behavior with business principles, and then that puts you in a spot where you can have that emotional and that logical kind of decision making process, which is pretty exciting. For I hope everybody listening can glom onto that as well. So if you put yourself back in school and you were, instead of thinking about going international and you were thinking more domestically and you were planning in school and you were thinking, I'm going to go into the sports industry and I want to lean into this concept of business intelligence, what would you focus on? Like, what would you come out of school and say, I have to know these things. These are things that I need to really make sure I understand and can do. And those are the things that are going to move the needle for me in my career. There's certain things that you'd focus in on.
Well, I'm biased because even though I went to school in public policy, people may not know that it's heavily based on economics and statistics. So if
Yeah.
you have a basic, comfortable understanding, even as one or two classes in economics or statistics, it'll help you a lot. Because at least, the way that grad school of public policy works is that you're trained extensively on those things. You can read academic papers, right? Now, I don't think not everyone needs to read academic papers, but you need to know what R squared is. You need to understand how to set up a survey. And these were the basic bones of if you want to go into business intelligence, you can understand that and also study businesses, right? I think
Right.
Harvard's approach to business cases, one of which we do have for the team, those are the good things to learn. That's how tech companies are started and grown, and be practical at your approach, and then get as many experiences as possible, because that's for me and myself personally. I wanted to make sure that I can survive and be successful in any vertical or any different kind of
Yeah.
sector as possible. And I established that foundation. And look, if you go to Kenya to learn how to build a water system for a village, or go to Hungary or go to Paris and learn something, all of it is great and will be additive to your experience, not just going down the line of I got a business degree, which is helpful, but I
Yeah.
think people value diversity experiences, and that'll be useful to you in the future, and that's going to be good for your application to your business school.
I love that. I think it's so smart. I think we got to just get rooted in reality. I think the idea that so many people have of being on the player side of, being a GM, being a scout, being a coach, it's like you said, that's limited. Like if you're really looking at it like I want to lean into the side that where there's the greatest potential there, it's really mastering and understanding that business side and how it all functions together and to get that fine of point on it to think of economics and statistics. Because again, even to your point, there are a lot of GMs that have in baseball and other sports that have economics and statistics background. So it's like you can
Hmm.
have both. You can have both with that education as well, which is really important to know. Let's talk tech a bit. Part of your responsibilities at LAFC, look to the future, right? Innovate, be creative in that way. I read where even back in 2017, you guys were doing virtual reality tours of the stadium before the stadium was built to go talk to potential corporate sponsors and walk them through what it could look like and see the environment for them, which I think is super cool. How essential is it to meet fans today where they are, which is with these massive tech like expectations, right? How important is it for you guys to stay on top of what's out there and what fans want in that regard?
It's very That's a great question. Technology is critical. And I'd have to say with our CTO Christian Lau, and we partnered early on to really look at the fan journey and the user journey of how people experience the stadium. We both lived abroad quite a bit, so the use of the mobile phone was very different from how the U.S. use it, right? I'm talking about NFC was used in Europe ages ago, and then we're just started using it a couple years ago. But we didn't even go innovate. Innovate is not about thinking of brand new ideas. It's taking
Mm.
best practices around the world and making it apply to here. So from the beginning, we said, okay, technology has to be number one in the user journey, and the mobile phone has to be the center of it. And backing behind is all the data that we see that we can adjust to make sure it's better for all people. So we're one of the first buildings to go. Well, I'm not sure if we're the first to go all NFC or Apple Pay, but we made sure that was available in every terminal. That's important now because
Yeah.
now you have 2 years ago or a year ago, 2 years ago, 19, there were two buildings that went cashless. We were ready to go cashless in 18, and now there's over 60 buildings that went cashless. Everyone has to make an investment. No one believed that, everyone thought, hey, our population knows a lot of cash. We proved them wrong. Credit,
Yeah.
Apple Pay, it just made that transaction faster. So either it's a fan experience that was great for faster transactions, or we needed to make the transactions faster because we're all about getting people through and get them off the concessions line, right? So that was one element of it. We went completely paperless with Ticketmaster. We did NFC ticketing. We're working with Clear on biometric. Right now, it's Health Pass, but we did biometric. We're working on biometric payment, biometric ticketing. We're making the complete experience for the fan frictionless, and optimizing their experience, and also from an operations standpoint, make it easier for us as well. So it's critically important. I mean, our Wi-Fi is one of the fastest in sports as well. Everybody is here um,
Yeah.
shooting content via different
Yeah.
social media channels. So there's so many elements that tech is at the center of right now in our experience, and it will be in the future. And now that it's been elevated and quickened by the pandemic, you're going to see now the whole sports industry changing overnight, alongside with everything else that's happening in other sectors as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how the idea of going cashless and Apple Pay and all those different things was cool 2 years ago, and now it's a necessity, right? It's like that's where we have to go, and so to be ahead of that is so important and amazing that you guys were able to accomplish that. With your previous roles involving climate and sustainability, something that I'm also very passionate about. Was it important to you personally to have Bank of California Stadium on the cutting edge on the green technology side as well? And do you feel like you guys succeeded there?
It was. I think that, when you build a project this big, ours is 370 million. I know that other stadiums are cost in the billions. I think sustainability has to be at the forefront of everything. We're in California, so it's kind of automatic in a sense, but at the same time doesn't prevent. I mean, everyone should be thinking about it. And I would have to tell you the truth. I mean, look, we had a lot of great successes, but we had a lot of mistakes on the way. So we couldn't deploy everything that we wanted from a green perspective, but we did achieve lead gold. And I think that's, there's only like one or two buildings that are platinum, and then a handful of buildings that are gold. So our commitment was pretty high from that regard. But we could have done more. I even explored thin solar panels on our, thin plastic, thin roof with the special plastic from Germany. Some were feasible, some weren't. We missed a couple items, but it's always on the forefront of how we think about things like recycling, waste, what we can do in the future as well when it relates to sustainability. And I think it's more important now than ever, and we continue to strive to do our best with it.
Benny, this has been an amazing conversation. We'll finish up with this. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for
I
having me.
uh, I want to know what game night is like for you. And I know it's different now. I want to go back. Let's just go back in time and pretend that none of this has happened. What's game night like for you? Because I read where you have quite a personality around the stadium. You're known as Stadium Benny. How important is it for you to be part of that community? Not just a EVP, like you are part of it all. Like, what is that like for you on game night?
It's great. It's great. It's great to, like I said, great to see people's happiness. Uh, People enjoy their food. People coming to the gates quickly and being happy and getting, they're just like really amped up. And it's interesting going back to when I first started this job. As I am a data geek as well, and I care about economics and all these weird behavioral economics things.
Yeah.
My inspiration was actually a podcast about why Caesar's Palace hired an economist from Harvard. And that ties in user experience with data and how to
Yeah.
maximize revenue altogether. And when you look at that and how that applies to the user journey, at the stadium. You got to think about all those things, like customer satisfaction. And look, we're not there to like make money. Like casinos have a very specific approach how to do this, right? But
Yeah.
it's all about the happiness index and then the revenue index and all of it coming together. So at game days, I'm all over the place, right? I'm outside checking out parking to make sure our parking works. Then I stop by what we call family picnics. Our supporters they are sprawled out in what we call Christmas Tree Lane in the park, and they bring their own their beer, their barbecue. These guys are serving free food to the security guards who are about to start their shift in the
It's
stadium
awesome.
and enjoy that. It's amazing. And then I'm at the gates making sure that people are flowing really fast at the gates. Then you go say hi to people and then check out the food, taste the food, make sure everything's working, and then look at the data. We have this great platform called Lava that gives us real-time data that I can actually adjust, move, and figure out how best to serve all the patrons in our building between parking, gates, fast lines, food lines, and everything else, and making sure that everyone's happy. And I think that there's no better job than say, how do we make people happy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what my game day looks like. And if we win, it's great. Then we have an after party, and then next day you go back to work and try to improve on the work that you do, the good work that we do at serving our fans and our community.
I like how you slipped in there that you have to taste the food too. I mean, you gotta do some quality assurance, right? You gotta
Oh,
check things out, make sure it's good and on point.
that's definitely for sure. We've got an exciting food program coming out this coming year. So yeah, it's all great
Awesome.
and exciting for sure.
It sounds awesome. I love the idea of just the tracking the happiness metrics too, and just being on top of that and understanding that that ties into revenue in the end. It's like it is a smart business decision, but really happiness culture first, everything else falls into place, which I think is such a great attitude. Benny, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is a great conversation.
Great. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Brian. Cheers.